From the Arizona Daily Star and Tucson.com, this is the Wildcast.
Thanks for listening to the Wildcast podcast here on Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts, and also the Wildcaster app, which you can download for free off the App Store and Google Play. And for the last time, as a roundtable, myself, Justin Spears, Michael Lev, and for the last day, sports editor of the Arizona Daily Star, Ryan Finley.
What's up?
Happy last day, Ryan.
Thank you. It's off to a terrible start. I went and got a haircut this morning, and when it came time to pay, I realized my wallet was on top of my dresser at home. So that's where we're at right now. I think things can only get better today.
We look good.
Thank you. Thank you.
You do look sharp, yes.
Jennifer was very forgiving. She allowed me to go home. It's not like she didn't need to hold like my
collateral,
right? She didn't tell me like leave my shoes or something.
You're regular for now.
For now.
Yeah.
So, no, I'm excited. Today's my last day. Starting Monday, I will be the sports editor at the San Diego Union-Tribune in San Diego, California. That is my hometown. Again, nothing I thought I'd be here forever. And this is the proverbial sort of offer. Well, what's the Godfather line? And it was sort of an offer I couldn't refuse.
You couldn't refuse.
But that doesn't make today easy. And before I lose it, it's just I've been here like 18 years. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, I can still remember driving over here, like at age 24, packed my car full of stuff to be like our high school's guy. And from that to here, it feels like it's gone by in a flash.
What happened in between school and here?
I went back. Actually, I worked for the North County Times.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
In San Diego, north of San Diego. I worked there for 2 years, just out of school, and then came back. Kristen Davis, who may be listening, Kristen Davis had left the Star to go work at the Cleveland Plain Dealer. They needed a new high schools person. I was visiting my girlfriend, now my wife, in Washington, D.C., when James Bennett, who was our sports editor at the time, called and offered me the job. I said yes, sitting on like the stoop of like a brownstone in Washington, D.C. I said, sure. He said, when can you start? I said, when do you need me? And he said, 2.5 weeks. I said, okay. So yeah, I had like this little SUV, packed it up, moved out here, and I mean, boom, 18 years just goes by in a flash. Don't get old, Justin. Don't get old.
Well, even though you're from San Diego.
Tucson's been home. Yeah.
Tucson has been your second home. You've lived here for a good chunk of your life.
22 of the last 24 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is crazy. And I love it here. It's so funny. It's been a really good week for sunsets. I don't know if you guys know this. It's that time of year. I've been in my backyard the last couple of nights, and you just sit there, you're like, this is fantastic, And, no, Tucson's great. Since I've been here, my twin brother, Patrick, moved out here, worked for the Star for a while, before moving on to Chicago. My dad lives here. I'm a big Tucson guy. I'm a big Tucson proponent. Everybody here is so nice, and you can't beat the weather and the people. So
I was going to ask you, so you went to Cathedral Catholic.
Back then it was known as University of San Diego High. They then closed it and moved it. The colors and the mascot are the same.
The Dons?
The Dons, the Cardinal and Gold. They look kind of like USC. But yeah, they changed the team name. So yeah, that's where I went. In my senior, Luke Walton was in my senior class. Mark Pryor, who pitched for the Cubs, was in my senior class. A guy named Barry Zito was 2 years older than me, and a guy named Carlos Quentin, who played in the big leagues, was a year younger than me. Pretty good crew.
Time.
Dang,
pretty good crew.
That school produced a lot of great athletes.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
And also Ryan.
and also me. I learned nothing from them.
Well, that's like Long Beach Poly, right? It's like, they have all these great football players, and then Snoop Dogg and Cameron Diaz.
Exactly. So that was. I mean, it's so funny. It feels like just the other day, but God, it was like 24-ish years ago. It's weird. Today's going to be kind of a surreal day, but I'm looking forward to it. We're all going to go get lunch after this, which will be nice. Joined by some other Star luminaries, I'm guessing. I've heard Greg Hansen may make an appearance. That would be very fun. So looking forward to it.
So then you went from Cathedral Catholic, or then University.
Go Dons.
Yeah. You went from being a Don to a Wildcat. Mm-hmm. So how did that happen? I never heard this story about how you went from living in San Diego to then becoming a student at the U of A.
I knew I wanted to go to a big school. I'd grown up a big UCLA fan. As a quick aside, my mom's uncle was their head football coach in like the 40s. Took him to a Rose Bowl and stuff. So we were a UCLA family. You didn't know that? I told you this. There was a framed thing in my office. He was on a Wheaties box.
First I've heard of it.
Okay, anyway.
No, and so Mickey and I, we had this joke, the assistant sports editor, we had this joke that like Ryan is kind of like Forrest Gump in life. He just for some reason, the world all goes through Ryan Finley.
I'm just a shameless name dropper. That's all it is. But I knew I wanted to go to a big school. We grew up going to Pac-12 games and San Diego State games, and I didn't want to go to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, and we started looking at schools. And I came out here and had just the world's best experience. It was like a 1997 home football game between Arizona and Cal. It was about 10 degrees out. Arizona won in what was then the new overtime rule. And it felt like college to me. And Tucson felt familiar enough, being from California, but still different enough. And then it's funny, when I came here for school, I absolutely hated it. I hated it for about the first 6 months. And I think it was just being away from home. School was hard because all of a sudden, you could skip a day's worth of classes to watch a baseball playoff game. Maybe I got a 1.9 my first semester of college GPA. But, I met the woman who would become my wife then, and got the two best things that ever happened to me was, showing up at the Wildcat one day and saying, "Do you need a reporter?" And running into and dating my wife. Mm-hmm. And, the Wildcat told me, "Hey, thanks, but no thanks. We've got a lot of applicants. Come back next semester." And over Christmas break, my freshman year, when I wasn't even really sure if I wanted to come back, I got a phone call from them saying, "The guy who covers the Ice Cats was in a terrible car accident. What do you know about hockey?" And I said, "Oh, I know hockey up and down." I didn't know hockey. I'd been to 2 hockey games in my life. Fun fact, I have still never been to an NHL game. I'm 42 years old. I said, "I know hockey."
Wow.
And they said, "Can you get back here a little earlier because they're playing ASU or something?" I said, "Sure." And so I covered the Ice Cats. And that was sort of my first taste of Leo Golombieski was like my first taste of journalism. He was their coach then, and they were good that year and newsy. And next thing you know, it's whatever it was. 3 years later, I'm editor-in-chief. Then I'm back here working at the Star. Then I'm sports editor. It was all, you hate to say like one little thing. Yeah. Had Mike Jenkins not been in that car accident, I still remember the guy's name. Had he not been in that car accident or not had, and had like a back issue, who knows if they ever would have called me.
Yeah.
I might have become a friggin' lawyer, So yeah, that's kind of where it all started.
Wow. And you were also the football beat writer in between then.
I was.
Between sports editor and your time as a student.
Yeah.
What do you remember about that time covering the Mike Stoops era? Because there were some losing seasons, but a lot of high moments, and a lot of NFL players came out of the deal.
Yeah, people look at it now kind of as the good old days, which is really funny because it wasn't. People go like, "Well, back then Arizona knew how to develop players." It's like, well, yeah, but they went 3-8, 3-8, 5-6, 6-5.
They didn't have the portal then.
It was a build. Not to steal sort of an Adia Barnes word. It was a build.
Also a Jed Fish.
Also a Jed Fish. What I liked about it, though, was the community rallying around it. And I don't want to be too critical because Tucson's a wonderful place. Even when they were crappy, Justin, you were in high school then, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Even when they were crappy, stadium was full. Mm-hmm. Stadium was full. And people seemed to rally around Stoops, who I think was kind of a blue-collar guy. I think he resonated here a little bit. Youngstown, Ohio, I think people rallied around. They appreciated that the team really tried. And then once a year, and we can sort of quote chapter and verse from this, once a year they'd jump up and they'd bite a team that they had no business, hanging with. Cal, right, Oregon, USC at the Coliseum. Once a year they'd get somebody. And I felt like Tucson really rallied around that.
Yeah.
Stoops and I think always got along pretty well. He was a good guy who I think was a little overmatched by the off the field stuff that you have to do as a head coach. I've always said being a head coach is like being mayor. You know, some people like kissing babies and signing proclamations, and some people don't. Yeah. You know, Mike Stoops wasn't going to go break out the giant oversized pair of scissors and open the grocery store. You know, Does that make sense?
The upset at USC, was that 2009?
Mm-hmm.
What's funny?
Pete Carroll's last game.
It was funny.
You were there?
I was at that game covering USC.
Gosh,
it's a small world after all.
Was it Sanchez? Was it Sanchez that year? Who's the quarterback?
Barkley as a freshman.
True freshman.
Barkley got sacked.
I remember it was kind of just a gloomy day, and it was just kind of not a lot of buzz. It was maybe a
it was an afternoon
weirdly
game.
scheduled
it was the final game of the year,
last game of the season, which is really odd to have Arizona face USC in the last game of the season.
It was Pete's last game.
Pete's last regular season game.
Season game.
Yep.
That game ended with 3 straight sacks. I think Earl Mitchell got one of them. Maybe Ricky Elmore got one. I always really enjoyed covering football, and you know, back then I was young. It was pre-kids for me. You know, I would find the rhythm of the football week would kind of get to me too. You know, so by Saturday afternoon, I was ready to go. You know, I mean, I was pissed. Like, I wouldn't be nice to people in my house. It was game day, you know, and you know, all I was doing was writing, right, and probably not writing very well, but it was really fun to be a part of just covering a team like that, you know. And it wasn't a team that was very popular, you know. Just being able to be around those guys, and you know, I can remember the people and the personalities from those teams were really fun. You know, I can off mic, I'll tell you a Nick Grigsby story, you know, and some great quotes from some guys that are just, you know, I still make me laugh.
Secondarily, you also covered U of A baseball, right? That's the job that I took.
Yep.
Football / baseball. And just by the way, I'm succeeding Ryan again here as interim sports editor. But this podcast is definitely not about me. It's about him. So you're covering baseball as well.
Right.
And they went and won the College World Series in 2012.
By the way, you can admit this now on air. When we hired you and I said, and you're going to have to cover college baseball in the spring, you didn't love the concept of covering college baseball.
Probably not.
And
but it wasn't because I didn't love baseball.
Right.
Yeah.
You just wondered sort of what the value of it was. And then you got out there and it took what? A month?
Yeah, 5 minutes.
Yeah.
I mean, it's super fun. I love covering that. I love covering that team that beat High Corbett's an awesome place to be on a spring evening in May.
Friday night.
Talk about sunsets.
We're all looking at Justin.
Best sunsets out there. So yeah, they won the freaking College World Series in 2012. I know you've got a lot of. You could tell Andy Lopez stories for days, but the floor is yours. Tell us about covering that coach, that team that year.
It's so funny. They were doing. It was the first day of practice, and they were at High Corbett. It was their first year at High Corbett, right?
Right.
And they were back on one of the annex fields, so beyond the right field wall. And, you know, Connor Wade or somebody's there throwing a bullpen. And, you know, Andy Lopez would let me, God bless him, stand next to him kind of as he did the sort of arms crossed coach thing, watching a guy throw a pen. And I go, Lopes, how do you look? You know, and he goes, I got a guy who can't throw strikes. I got a guy, I got a starting pitcher, you know, I don't know if he can break 90. You know, my number 2 guy has decided he can't throw strikes. My number 3 guy has, you know, a medical issue that was keeping him out at the time. He goes, if we can pitch, we'll be okay. But man, I don't know. And, you know, 4 months later, it's the best pitching performance maybe in the history of college baseball.
Wow.
And, you know, that team, it's so funny. I talked to Lopes 2 weeks ago. We were talking about all this stuff. And, you know, it's so funny how many of those guys are still kind of around. You know, Kurt Heyer was pitching in the Mexican Winter League a month ago.
Yeah.
Robert Refsnyder may start for the Boston Red Sox this year.
Yeah.
You know, they had a lot of arms and a lot of guys on that team. Connor Wade was in the big leagues as recently as like 2021. You know, it's been 10 years, but a lot of these guys have made a pretty good living off of baseball. It was just so much fun. And, you know, there was no drama. I mean, they went out there and, I mean, they didn't lose. I mean, they won 10 straight, 12 straight postseason games?
I should know this since I wrote a whole series about it this past June.
Yeah.
But yeah, they were ruthless and efficient. And I think required a couple comebacks. I think maybe some of their worst games were during the when they were here still.
Yeah.
But once they got out to Omaha, I mean, they just didn't give up any runs.
And you look at the guys who they played. Michael Roth at the time at South Carolina was sort of a soft tossing lefty who I think was MVP of the World Series the year before.
Christian Walker,
the Diamondbacks first baseman.
Did they have a guy named like Pancake?
Probably.
Okay. Like their third baseman.
No. Yes, they did. Very good, Justin.
Okay.
It's like Tyler Pancake.
Yeah.
And Florida State was seen as a big favorite that year. I think that was Mark Martin's last year. Mike Martin, their longtime head coach.
Okay.
It was just fun. I mean, I remember being struck by how awesome Omaha, Nebraska is. If you have a chance to go. Lev, you've been
100%.
You sit there.
Yes,
you get
been
mad.
there twice. It's amazing.
You get mad a little. Like you walk the streets, you go, Omaha's smaller than Tucson is. Why don't we have an arena across the street from a 5-year-old stadium? And just the whole college baseball experience is spectacular for me. No team I ever follow has ever won anything. When I started,
tell me about it.
When I started at the U of A, it was 1998. So they had just won the championship my junior year of high school. They've been to one Final Four since then. I grew up following the Chargers, Padres, San Diego State, all these other teams. That night in Omaha, I mean, I got to watch the team I follow win a championship.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother thing. It was really cool. And, everybody there was both, it was inevitable because they had played so well. But when you win a national championship, stuff changes. These guys, I was there on the field basically for the greatest moment of these guys' lives. It's hard to top winning a national championship.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and you have to kind of detach yourself emotionally from it.
Yes.
Because you have a job to do too, and I remember sort of the flip side of that, the emotion standing next to the dugout in 2016 when they were the national runners up and they basically needed one more hit to win it all and couldn't get it. And they had to, there's this whole trophy presentation on the field and the second place team gets a trophy, so they have to stick around, which seems like cruel and unusual punishment. It was tough, and that was a tough locker room to go into too. I mean, those guys were devastated, but
they were right there.
They were right there. Yeah, that was 4 years later.
Oliver, right?
Jared Oliver,
among many.
Who's the guy who was held at third?
Who
on the double to left field? Didn't Jay hold a guy at third?
He did. I'm trying to remember the sequence of events. If it was Cody Raymer who was,
I think it was Raymer,
held. And Ryan Hogg ended up being the last batter because Cesar Salazar had gotten a concussion.
Wow. Off
of a backswing earlier in the game. And Ryan Hogg is a superb defensive catcher, but never really much offensively. So, and he struck out to end the game.
Can I tell you while we're talking about baseball what maybe my favorite Tucson sports memory is?
Sure. That's why we're here.
I'm sure that was on your list of questions.
Yes. Honestly, I had no rundown.
That's good.
I'm like, we're going to go full acapella.
Good. We're going to wing it.
Yeah.
I like it. My favorite Tucson sports memory is my favorite sports memories are the things that you just kind of luck into. I was on vacation in California in the middle of the pandemic in 2020 when we found out that the Padres were scrimmaging, and my wife and I were able to watch a scrimmage with like 5 other people on the berm at Petco Park, stuff like that, right? My favorite Tucson sports memory is this. The World Baseball Classic, and I'm dating myself here. I can't even tell you when that was. Maybe it was 2012, something like that. Team Mexico was training down here in Tucson. And they had a scrimmage one afternoon against Pima College. It was on a back field at Keno. There were maybe 30 or 40 people there. When I'd arrived, I went with my brother. When we had arrived, guys had brought the little barbecues like you see at tailgates.
Yeah.
Like the little tiny things. They put just a 30-pack of beer down in the dirt. And all of them were there to see Team Mexico. I mean, they may have been from Mexico to see Team. I mean, they were all, they were speaking Spanish and knew exactly who they were looking for.
Yeah.
And they sat there and they watched. And I mean, it's like, Lev, it's like the kind of field your high school freshman kid will play on this year. I mean, chain link fence, it was nothing fancy. And you just look in the on deck circle, you go like, well, who's on deck? Oh, it's Adrian Gonzalez. Oh, well, who's behind him? Oh, it's Vinny Castilla. Oh, who's behind him? Oh, that's Jorge Cantu. Remember Jorge Cantu? He was good. He was good for a while. And then they'd go, oh my God, who's pitching? That's Esteban Loaiza. And it was this sort of who's who of big leaguers. And they weren't all superstars, but you had heard of every single guy.
Yeah.
There was no rando on that team. Going up against like Pima, and there's maybe 30 people there. And it was awesome. And you got to sit there and just for a dork like me, who took, I think, 2.5 years of college Spanish, it wasn't long before, somebody hands you a beer or you turn and you ask the guy next to you in your best Spanish, hey, who's that guy and how do you get here and all this stuff. And it was A, so cool. And B, it's just such a perfect example of what's best about sports. Is, you sit next to a guy at a game, and if the moment's right, you learn a lot about each other, right? Somebody offers you a handful of peanuts at a ball game or whatever it is. It is my favorite Tucson sports memory, and I think about that a lot. I mean, I think about that day a lot when people ask why sports matters. What would you have paid to see that?
Yeah.
And,
that's perfect. Right. I mean, yeah. Adrian Gonzalez,
LT Tom.
Sort of
Justin's boy. Yeah.
the godfather of San Diego baseball. Maybe, was he number 2 behind Tony Gwynn in all-time
in my book, he
ranks?
Is. In my book, he is. He could have been, I think had he stayed and had they signed him, he could have his own statue.
Is he from there too?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. That's what I thought.
Yeah. Anyway, that's a separate pocket. My new job, one of the perks is I get to co-host a Padres podcast.
Oh man.
We will talk about Adrian Gonzalez's place in the world on that podcast.
Sold. Ryan was like, "You had me at Padres podcast,"
and they're like, "Do you think that you'll have time to co-host?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm taking the job because of the podcast." Yeah. So,
real quick, 'cause I know we got to take off for your going away barbecue, or it's not a barbecue.
No, it's
lunch.
Burgers.
Yeah,
burgers.
Was there ever a time where you're the sports editor and you were like, "Man, I really don't want to be doing this right now"?
Oh yeah.
Like I think about
Lev's gone through this.
I think about what immediately comes to mind was federal investigation, scandal with the Arizona basketball program. Because I just remember that day, that week, that whole season. It just felt like all of us who were involved covering that wanted to pull our hair out.
Yeah, and I mean, and that lasted for years.
Yeah,
years. It's funny when I took over. For Shannon Connor, who's a fabulous boss. She had sort of this file of stuff we need to have ready just in case, right? And so, you wouldn't, God forbid, you'd think about, where Arizona would be with Lute Olson gone, right? Or whatever it would be. All these sort of, big stories that are coming on the horizon. And all of them happened during my time here. I mean, an NCAA investigation happened, an FBI investigation happened. Multiple football coach firings, a federal lawsuit against one of the fired football coaches, all of this other stuff. It was not fun. I mean, it was not fun. You try to make the best decisions you can in real time. And, you try to be as fair as you can. You realize sort of capital J journalism steps in. But you know what? It's part of the job, too. I mean, what makes newspapers different from a lot of different news organizations, especially when it comes to college sports, is, we cover the good with the bad. We can't just decide to not cover the bad stuff. And that was challenging, but that's also what you signed up for in this profession.
Yeah.
And, I think that now, 5 or 6 years later, of course, all this is now resolved and I'm leaving. So, it's, I guess it puts a bow on it.
I have one more question for you.
Yes.
What is the value of something like the Arizona Daily Star sports section / department to this community? Why is it important that we carry on your legacy, do a good job, cover the crap out of sports in this town?
I think that a city like Tucson is made up of so many different groups of people. we're a city of 1 million people, but we're kind of 5 towns of 200,000 people. You've got retirees, you've got students, you've got people coming from all over, Midwestern transplants, people coming up from Mexico,
military
people. There are all these different segments, right? And all of us in our own lives are all kind of connected to that too, right? You married into an old Tucson family, right? I came here for college and never left. You came here in part because your dad with the Air Force, or working for the Air Force, right? I mean, that's just the 3 of us in this room.
Yep.
It's all political spectrums. It's all opinions. The one thing everybody seems to agree on is Arizona Wildcat sports. It's the thing that, as a graduate of the school, if you see somebody in the Milwaukee airport and they're wearing a U of A shirt, you can walk up to them and go, "Hey, how about that?" And you talk. It's the one thing that everybody, and nobody loves the U of A more than Tucson locals, whether they went there or not, right? There's nobody more passionate than somebody who grew up here. To me,
you could go to a sports bar and a guy who's never taken a class at the U of A has the Wildcat tattoo on their hand or arm, whatever.
Absolutely. And there's Tucson is such a good sports town. And part of that is because of the passion that everybody here seems to have for the Wildcats. My dad retired here, basically. My dad's more into them than I ever was. I mean, he's got favorite players. He gets to games early so he can watch them shoot. It talks about, last night, talking about the development of Henry Visar, but that's the one thing everybody here seems to agree on is Arizona sports. And we need that. It's what stitches communities together. And not to sound like an old man, but, everybody's staring at their phone all the dang time now. You don't have to watch anything you don't want to watch anymore. You don't have to, you can cultivate a news feed that only tells you what you want to hear. We need more community things that everybody agrees on. And sports is one of those. And Arizona Wildcat sports is a big reason why.
Well, Ryan, like I told you this on the radio show.
Yes.
I'm indebted to you.
No.
I appreciate you because you gave me my first gig coming out of college. You gave me a shot. And one thing I appreciate about you is that you were such a great mentor. Mm-hmm. You always gave me just sound advice, but you always allowed me to be myself. Mm-hmm. And I think Lev can say that, and everyone else who worked under you can say that. You were a great manager, a great boss, but you never stood in the way of who we wanted to be or what we wanted to do. Thank you for that.
That's well put. Yes, just the right amount of guidance. Hands on when needed, hands off when it was appropriate. And I feel like we thrived under your leadership here. I've been here since December of 2015, so a little over 7 years. Yeah.
God, it's been 7 years.
Yeah, 7 years.
Wow.
One
I still
one
think
bowl game.
You're the new guy.
Are we going to pick the national championship game before we go out here?
Oh shoot!
Right.
What's the line?
Okay, I've got TCU plus 12.5. Is that? Since just in honor of Pac-12 Pick'ems, which Ryan won this year, going away against the spread, far and away the best. TCU against Georgia, of course, Monday night. TCU's getting 12.5. I'm going to take the Horned Frogs in the points. I think that they're kind of a team of destiny. And they've got a lot of speed. Max Duggan he's a playmaker. And I just feel like they're that team this year. No one's ever really done what they've done just to get to this point. So I think Georgia's going to win, but I think by less than 12.5.
Yeah. Where was that Georgia defense that we've been told for a year is the best in the history of football? They didn't look so great against Ohio State. I like this too. I like Sonny Dykes. I mean, going back to when he was Arizona's offensive coordinator, such a good guy. I think America is seeing this week he's just kind of a normal dude, who's a really smart college football mind. I don't think that TCU is going to win. I mean, that would be a Butler wins a national championship in basketball kind of thing. But I think TCU is going to keep it close. So I agree with Lev. I think that it's like a 7-9 point game with Georgia winning.
Georgia's defense lost a lot this past year, but they also reloaded. They still have Keely Ringo, who's the best cornerback in college football. But 12.5 is a lot for a national championship game because it's the Natty.
Yeah.
Things are slow at first, and then
There's a lot of feeling out early in big games.
Yeah, it's like a boxing match.
Yes, exactly.
So I think that eventually Georgia will pull away. But I got the Bulldogs winning by 10 points. So I got TCU covering.
Love it.
One last pick before we send off
So
Ryan.
we all agree? What an anticlimactic way to finish.
And you know what? How about all the, like this Space Jam, how all the Monstars got their talents from NBA players? You got Sonny Dykes, who used to coach Nick Foles, right?
He did.
So the power of Nick Foles in a championship game, a redheaded quarterback, Andy Dalton, the best TCU quarterback of all time. You know what? I'm gonna completely change my pick to be different.
There we go.
Let me go TCU to win.
To win. There we go.
By the way, I'm gonna whisper this real quick. Duggan's the best TCU quarterback of all time. He's better than Andy Dalton.
Well, now, yeah.
But he also plays in an offense where he throws 60 times a game.
True.
So, anyway, Justin, before we do sign off, I can't imagine. Tucson is so lucky to have Michael and you and Bruce and Greg and PJ Brown and Caitlin Schmidt and all these people who work so hard every day to keep people informed. This is a really hard day for me, but it's made so much easier knowing that you guys will keep doing it and keep us going. So thank you guys. And to people who have listened and put up with my rambling, the next guy doesn't ramble as much as I do. So you, our listeners, win, which is good.
Ryan, congratulations once again.
Congratulations, Ryan, and thank you for everything.
Absolutely.
Yep.
All right, and that'll do it for this episode of the Wildcast. Subscribe, rate, and review the Wildcast wherever you listen to podcasts, and be sure to download the Wildcaster app for free off the App Store and Google Play. Thanks for listening.